All right, so I'm Judy Morgan. I'm the current chair of the ESS and the chief compliance officer for Pace Analytical. Brad Meadows, I see you're on the phone. You want to just introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. This is Brad Meadows. I'm the vice chair here for the ESS committee, and I'm the vice president and technical director out at Babcock Laboratories in Riverside, California. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Brad. Yep, so welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. I'm going to turn this over to Dave Friedman to get us started today, and he's going to be giving us some overviews of some things, and then hopefully spark some discussion. And then I think Dave Kennedy is going to be on here in a little bit. I don't see him yet, but hopefully he's here, and he's going to talk to us a little bit this afternoon about some additional things on the agenda. So Dave Friedman.
Okay. The first issue or the first topic that we're going to discuss is the Environmental Monitoring Coalition, and to get your feedback on what they should be working on. As everyone knows, the new Environmental Monitoring Coalition was formed to carry on the work of the former Environmental Laboratory Advisory Board and to serve as a means for the greater monitoring community to come up with consensus recommendations to then present to EPA, to other federal agencies, and to the states and tribes. Currently, the coalition is working on several issues. I just want to first take a minute and remind everybody what the current issues that the EMC is working on. One is to update the Drinking Water Method 200.8, which is an ICP-MS method, to reflect current interference rejection technologies. We have a work group that's been formed that has a number of the manufacturers, laboratory, members of ACIL, state laboratories, and other federal and other agencies such as APHL. And they came up with the suggestion that the EMC set up a joint work group with EPA to address current issues holding back issuance of an updated method, and then to help EPA in validating whatever draft comes out of this effort. That was presented at our last meeting, which was last week, to Jack Creed from EPA. He agreed to work on it, to work with us, and I've got to talk to him as to how we actually do that. He also mentioned that a package of information had been prepared and sent to some people a while ago, and we'll try to get that information from him to bring everybody up to speed on where EPA Office of Research and Development is with that. Another issue that we're working on is the holding times for acrolein and acrylonitrile. The EMC has a study going on to look at what would happen if the EPA changed the holding time, the preservation, I should say, from the current to pH less than 2, and the holding time to 2 weeks. That study is going on right now. The data is being gathered, and hopefully in another month we'll have that information, and if things work out well, we'll be able to present to EPA, and hopefully they can then, assuming it works well, change the requirements. Also, TNI has been working on guidance for initial demonstration of capability. When you conduct an initial demonstration of capability and analyzing for a large number of analytes with a particular method, basically sometimes randomly you get a couple wrong. The question then becomes what happens if the analyst gets the vast majority of analytes correct but misses a few. And as I said, due to random error, this is likely to happen. So question then comes into how many can be missed before it's considered not a good demonstration of capability. The wastewater and RECRA programs have some guidance, I think, on that, and TNI is trying to codify all that, and the EMC is working through that to make sure it's written correctly and everybody can agree with that. The fourth item I just want to highlight is that EPA EMC is going to be reaching out to the new EPA management, the administrator, to try to convince them, EPA management, to work with the EMC, to inform them who the EMC is all about and everything, and working on trying to come up with that letter. So that's basically where the EMC is up to right now. Judy and I have been trying to represent the ACIL membership in the EMC and pick and push for projects that we think the the ACIL membership would like us to do. And that's how came up with the ICPMS project and also the holding time project. But what we would like to do this morning is, this afternoon, I should say, is to get your feedback on what other possible topics do you want us to push the EMC to work on. Some that come to mind are new analytical technologies that the membership thinks really need to be approved by EPA, but they haven't been able to get to it because it's not a high priority for the agency's needs right now. But we think from a productivity or other standpoint, it would be good if those were approved. We've always been working on harmonization to try to work with the agency programs to harmonize their methods, mainly by a new methodology, bringing the program offices together to work together to develop methods so that they can then, when they do put out the methods, the methods are harmonized. For years, we've talked about having a national environmental laboratory accreditation program in the United States. While a lot of progress has been made towards that, as everybody knows, it's far from a national program. Is that something that the EMC should do its best and really focus its efforts on? Are there issues at the state level with monitoring? I know there are issues with at the state level on monitoring methodology and accreditation standards and how they use EPA methods and so on. Is that an area that people think deserves a lot more attention? It's been brought to our attention that we should raise the issue of sampling, make that more important, because as everybody probably knows, probably the biggest source of error in environmental monitoring is in the sampling, is getting the right samples and taking them correctly and so on, even though that gets probably the least attention. Another one is on PFAS monitoring methodology. As everybody knows, EPA and other was working with DOD to develop improved methodology, but is that something that more needs to be done and that EMC can help out on? So those are some thoughts that we're throwing out to stimulate discussion. And now let me turn it over to the group for comments, suggestions.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, David. You know, we hear a lot of things, you know, and we've all dealt with harmonization, the term harmonization. So, I mean, so explain to me in your mind what successful harmonization looks like. What does that mean to most people? Because we've got harmonization of state monitoring methodology and accreditation standards, but then there's the harmonization of the EPA methods across programs. So I mean, it's two different types of harmonization, but if you would start with the EPA methods across programs and tell me what you think success looks like there, maybe that would kind of help everybody to maybe ask some additional questions.
I guess if if you had a given technology for a given analyte. And each of the programs for that particular technology issued a method that was compatible, so that if, let's say, you were doing something like a vol organic, like what would be like a 624, let's say, type analysis, and the RECRA program had whatever they called that. Now, the 624 contains the sampling, the analysis as one method. The RECRA may have two methods for that. But if the sample prep of the RECRA method and the sample prep of the wastewater method were the same, and the analysis parts were the same, such that if a lab was to follow the wastewater method, it would be acceptable to the RECRA's program, and vice versa. To me, that would be harmonization, even though it's two different methods, have different method numbers, and the way it's written. In the wastewater program, you would have to use a particular sample prep method and a particular analysis method. And in the RECRA program, you might have more flexibility, but if you used those two, the same two that was in the wastewater method, it would be automatically acceptable to the drinking water, to the RECRA program. And if you used those same two RECRA methods, it would then be acceptable to the wastewater program. So that to me would be harmonization.
Can I jump in on this one, David? This is Adrian Hanley.
Sure.
I kind of feel like this issue's been like beat to death and sent to the glue factory. About 5 or 6 years ago, it was elevated all the way up to Mike Shapiro, and I believe you got a written response on it. We do, for new methods, certainly try to conform to whatever the first existing method is where we can. But for your example, Clean Water Act versus RCRA, I mean, most of those RCRA methods, with a few narrow exceptions here and there, are guidance. So if you follow the Clean Water Act method, you are pretty much following the RCRA method. I'm sure you could find some specific examples where that's not true, but for the most case it is. For most cases it is. And also, it's one thing to do it sort of moving forward for new methods, which all of the EPA method programs are pretty conscientious of now. But if you think that, we're going to go back and, rewrite all our old methods, I just don't see that happening. It's a giant ask. It's a huge expenditure of funds for, a very large number of methods.
Adrian, I have absolutely no disagreement with you. That's why I pointed out what we've been doing is by working all the programs together, it's been solving that problem. I'm with you. I mean, I don't see how you could ever get the resources to go to historical methods and rewrite them. So, I mean, but Judy asked what I think is harmonization. That to me would be harmonization. I could talk about the drinking water versus wastewater program or something like that. But as people are working together, I think the harmonization is happening.
I got to agree with Adrian and Judy. This topic has been on the radar, I think, since I got into this business, and I'm starting to really feel like a very old and tired Don Quixote every time this thing comes up. I think it's a very important idea. I think we have to um, limit the scope of the universe in some way because it's too big of a topic. And maybe if it gets refined down to something accomplishable, um, that's doable. Regarding old methods, some of these old methods need to go away. And if they're not going to go away, then there needs to be some sort of, I'm not going to call guidance, some sort of way that a laboratory can upgrade them or is required to upgrade them so that they actually reflect better quality. And I know 40 CFR 136, I think 136.7 started to do some of that, but there kind of needs to be, some more of that. And maybe maybe what we need is a different approach than just saying we need to harmonize methods across programs.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jack. This is Adrian again. I think you're going to get a lot more traction if you come up with a couple focused agenda items on this and then sort of move them forward to EPA. But just sort of the general, we need to harmonize methods. I don't think you're gonna get any more traction than you have already on that subject. That's just my opinion.
Hi, this is Zoe. I think too that if you look at the methods themselves, and Judy did a great paper on this a couple of years ago at NELAC, it's the quality control testing that's different between the methods in some cases and really doesn't need to be. I mean, and Jack, I've probably been around as long as you have with some of these issues. For me, it's always when new technology is introduced, the method should be written so that we know whether the new technology can be applied to that method without having to create a whole new method. For example, certainly that issue with the 200.8 and the cell technology. I mean, if you read that method, it looks like you should be able to use that technology. It's just a given. And if you meet the QC, then why not? But since 2006, you couldn't use it for drinking water. So, that's a discontinuity that's very uncomfortable for analytical instrument manufacturers who are spending huge amounts of money to move technology forward. So it seems to me that, with some sort of examination of the quality control required and whether or not it supports the methodology, that would be a very helpful thing in trying to make it more methods have a longer lifetime.
Well, right now, with respect to harmonization, the EMC effort on the initial demonstration of capability is what is going on. We're trying to bring the drinking water program in line with the Clean Water Act and RECRA programs.
Yeah,
It's
just
just a matter of, is there something else in that regard that is not already being done with respect to harmonization? I mean, we have, by working with everybody, all the programs at once to try to have everybody the same method, to, if there's a specific QC or thing that needs to be harmonized, that's not, we're looking at that. But is there anything else? Otherwise, if people are happy, it's all right.
I don't think that's the point, David. I think the point is there's a lot of stuff there, but we've got to find a way to eat the elephant one bite at a time. Because when we say we want to do harmonization, everybody scatters into different ways. And I think there's been a lot of progress on um, new methods and trying to do some refit for some of the older methods. But I think there are issues, and I don't think it just has to do with initial demonstration of capabilities. And I'm not familiar with what EMC is trying to do there, but I mean, TNI has requirements for initial demonstrations of capabilities, and I'm just not sure what's going there, but that may be an issue. And if we can define that issue, cool, let's go with it. Maybe look at other things where we can define that issue that would lead to more simplification of the number and types of methods and stuff, which is what we really want, while maintaining or increasing the quality and usability.
This was an issue that TNI brought to the EMC there to make sure that their guidance, everybody agrees with that guidance that they, or their
Yes, I'm
requirements
good.
that they
Yeah,
put out.
I thought that's what it might be, but I didn't want to
Yeah.
overstep things in case people were looking at a whole new change in paradigm.
Yeah, so David, if I may add something here. So I mean, just listening to everybody talk, I'm hearing, so the main issues, and I agree with Adrian. This feels like this has been beat to death and back, and I know I feel the same way. but you know, main issues, nothing's really changed on this. We've got aged methods. Most of them, they're program driven. There's no real provision for new technology, as pointed out by Zoe. And then some, but the thing that we have to keep in mind is going back to what Jack said about not eating that, you know, that you got to eat the elephant one bite at a time. Some methods are higher profile than others, and that's the one thing that, you know, when the laboratories worked with EPA on the changes to 608, 624, and 625, we shortlisted those methods because those are the ones that, out of the 600 series, the top 20 600 series methods, if you were to look at them, those are the ones that top the list from giving us the most information from the standpoint of monitoring. So, you know, I would venture to guess that probably one of the best things that we could do as an industry, it would be to roadmap what harmonization looks like, build a roadmap to how we need to get there, because you know, new technology should have a known pathway for use in any existing method. And part of the problem is, you know, when we wrote these methods, nobody really knew where technology was going. I mean, sure, we all grew up watching the Jetsons and we all thought cars would fly someday, you know, but the reality is they probably will. It may not be in my lifetime, but if that kind of technology takes place in our daily lives, then that kind of technology is taking place with our methods as well, and the methods just aren't provisioned for that change. So the roadmap should, in my opinion, should tell us how we need to get there, what we're bringing together, and what the important things are that needs to be harmonized. I mean, Zoe pointed out that there's the differences in quality control. Why are they different? I mean, that goes down to as something as simple as even the terminology of an LFB versus an LCS. You know, I mean, things such as that. I mean, even just the terminology that we use for certain things, method to method, program to program. We all know it because we all live in it. But the reality is why are there differences? And does that really need to be harmonized? I don't know if it does or not. I think that's what the roadmap would show. But the prioritization and how it needs to be brought together is really what we need to focus on, because we can, again, we can all keep bringing this up and we can all keep talking about it like Jack said, but until somebody sits down, whether it be a group of people in a collaborative effort, until everybody sits down at the table and decides what that roadmap needs to be, I don't think we're going to get there. I think it's always going to be a pain in our butts. No offense.
So Judy, this is William. As a commercial lab, is that your biggest problem?
That what harmonization?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it is a big problem, because I mean, the reality is the expectation by program is different, and it's not, and I don't think it's driven by, you know, the programs thinking that their data is more important or what the reason is, but it is a thought process that I think if the goal were to just put out, you know, solid, quality, defensible data, I think that's a better goal than, oh, we have to adhere to this for this program. We have to adhere to this for this program. And how many times do you stop and say, why are we doing this and does it make it better? I think we've all asked, why are we doing this? I don't think anybody's ever come up with, does it make it better? And honestly, I think we're all so busy doing our jobs that we've never really truly sat down and took a look at it.
So I'm just saying that because, you know, to set a priority, like, you know, the rationale for 624, 625, and 608 is because everybody runs them.
Yep.
And that was an issue. So now, you know, assuming that's solved, what's the next biggest thing? And down the list, and try to do this, you know, Dave's question based on what is the biggest problem for ACIL labs? You know, not vendors, ACIL labs, because that's what ACIL is.
Right. So to give my opinion on that, I feel like that is one of the biggest problems. And I feel like by picking out 608, 624, and 625, I feel like we've gotten a good start on moving forward. Because of that, the collaborative effort that was, and this next piece of gathering data from the laboratories to set new quality control criteria that's more relevant to the current way the methods are being run, with the type of technology and the columns and this, that, and the other. They're no longer packed. we're no longer, integrating and weighing things. I mean, we could go back a long ways on this technology. I mean, on the improvements. So, yes, I believe that is probably one of the key things. I would like to hear from some of the other labs as to how they feel about what they feel like the biggest priority is, because from the standpoint, I know you're you're a supplier, and I know you're talking about this from a lab's perspective, but it's really about the joint community, because you're providing technology, you and others like you are providing technology that's allowing us to do things better and faster and so on and so forth. And by having those opportunities, we need an avenue or a pathway to be able to integrate those reasonably. I'm not even to say easily, because it's not about making it easy. It's about making it reasonable for what we're trying to do. It's for the betterment of the data, and it's for the use of better technology. So all of that kind of comes into play. So it all works together in my opinion, on the pathway to harmonization. It's everybody like hold hands, kumbaya, whatever you want to call it. It's everybody moving forward together with the best that we've got in a way that we can all use it.
Sorry, I'm sitting here trying to think about how to respond to this particular one. Give me just a minute. Let me stew on that for a moment.
Yeah. So while Brad's thinking, I'm going to say that Dave and I were talking about this, not this particular subject earlier, but something similar, and it's about where the focus is, and the focus being on solving client problems, rather than just delivering data under current circumstances. And so everything that we have right now guides how we deliver our data, whether it be through the CLP program, what specifications of the method, specifications of the program. And so the question is while we focus on that, are we really making sure that we're relevant in solving current problems? I mean, a great example that he used is the use of the TCLP method. And is it still relevant to how we do things? No, not really. But are we comfortable with what it's giving us, or are we really comfortable with it, or are we just used to it? Are we used to using that as an indicator? Because the leaf methods are out now, and they will gain traction at some point. But there's we're slow to move. We're slow to move on what we accept from the standpoint of monitoring our environment. And I know that's a big statement, but I mean, but the reality is there is a lot to it, and all of this comes together and comes down to method harmonization, because it's the methods that drive how we put this data together. So I'm going to shut up there and see if anybody else has got anything to say, because I could talk for a
Well,
while.
Judy, this is Brad. I think that the one thing you just said there was kind of what was, I think, bothering me the most here, is that we are slow to move and we're slow to adopt. And in terms of solving customer problems, a lot of our customer problems do require new techniques, new methodologies, new instrumentation, and so forth. And so as we progress and new things are introduced, our inability to take advantage of some of that stuff is, I think, from my standpoint, and my frustrations in the lab, the number one problem is I have this new thing that's out there that I can't necessarily take advantage of, or I can't move as quickly on it as is maybe what I would like to, tied into because of, we are written in, following methods that are not necessarily completely prescriptive, but certainly have some bumpers and boundaries that the new technology may push up against, in spite of the fact that maybe it is more specific, it is more sensitive, it is more reliable, better, faster, cheaper. I think from my standpoint, it's our inability to take advantage of new stuff, said so eloquently, is, in my opinion, I think one of our biggest problems.
Well, Brad, and I guess this get one of the first things I threw out as a discussion topic as a thing. Are there particular new technologies that the EMC should take up, that you think the EMC should take up, or is this more of a, are you looking at it as more of a generic issue for
I
future
th-
technologies?
I think it's more of a generic issue, David, in this particular case. It's not one specific, but it's, whether it's I want to replace one detector with another, or whether I want to make, because it is, once again, more sensitive, more specific, more universal, however it's working. Or something different in the preparatory step, anything along that lines. But it's who knows what somebody's what one of the instrument providers is coming up with, or maybe a supplier, maybe they have the magic widget that I want to use. But it's being able to incorporate that new technology into what we do day in and day out, ultimately for the benefit of our customers and the betterment of the environment. And I'll be honest, maybe the benefit of our bottom line a little bit too.
Yeah, I kind of coming up with three thoughts, or three buckets, if you will. I mean, as scientists, we can only go so far. Some of this issue is science, but a lot of this issue isn't. And that's where we start to get into the regulatory process and acceptance, across programs, and things. And I don't think that we're ever going to solve that unless we can come up with and this goes to the third bucket, a process or set of processes that we can encourage the various data end users or the various regulators to accept for us to do this method substitution. And I know Adrian's group, I know you guys have been, I think, moving in the right direction. And I think one thing there is we ought to pick the next 5 methods to be looked at. And that's, part of it. But I think there needs to be an overall, hey, I got this new technology. Without going through a whole new process, how do we adopt this for existing programs that may be under permit, or that may be under a consent decree or something? And some of that, I think we've got to start thinking less as scientists, and more as what a lot of us are here as business leaders, and kind of work at 3 places. And I think EMC, you can probably, do that. Start thinking about a process for revamping some of these that maybe plays off of what's in, 136.7. Look at how we can encourage users and regulators to be more cognizant of, it doesn't matter what the method is. It matters more, is it fit for purpose, and can you rely on the data coming out of it? And some of these are tough questions, but I think that's kind of, to me, how to kind of break this down a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense.
Jack, I do think it makes sense. And I think really, I think what we're coming down to here, I think we're just in conversation. I feel like we do need to put together some type of roadmap that everybody can agree on. And I think that in that roadmap, it would tell us the things that the industry wants to focus on. I also think that just like with 608, 624, and 625, I do believe that the effort needs to be expanded. But I tell you, one of the things that we did to help determine those methods is we polled or surveyed the laboratories, and we got a good response on it, if I remember correctly. And everybody ranked these methods in order of importance, and that's how we ended up with the choices that we made. So it was an industry, it was an industry decision on that focus. And I think that we need to do something similar here when it comes to determining our path forward. Is is come together and talk about those things and then get feedback on what things are most important, you know, to the actual groups.
I would just add two things. I think we've got to get away from methods and start talking more about technologies. So maybe we find a technology that, you know, purgeable organic analysis or something,
Mm-hmm.
but a technology that we work on as opposed to each individual method, and come up with, hey, if you're going to do this type of technology, here are the things that you need to worry about from quality control. You know, and then, you know, we've got quality system standards that'll set a bunch of things in place, but here's what we need to work on there. But I really think that we need to find ways to encourage some of our colleagues um, that are, you know, regulators or data users as to, you know, so what if it's 624? So what if it's 524? You know, does it meet the requirements? Is it sound data? Is it reliable data? Do we know the pedigree of the data? All of those types of things. And that's really where we got to, where I think we got to go long term.
I agree with that. Anybody got any thoughts? I mean, do we feel like maybe that, you know, getting to the end of this, I mean, do we feel like that trying to put together, you know, a pathway to get us to where we're trying to go, to first of all define exactly, not exactly, because you can't define the future. You can define your goals and you can define what you want out of something, but I think we got to define what we're trying to get out of this process. I mean, it's going back again back to what Adrian said. You know, we've talked about this, but nobody has ever put it down on paper what the plan is. I think we need to put the plan down, and I think it needs to be a known plan with feedback and input from those who need to help execute the plan. I mean, at the end of the day, the plan is a collaborative effort. So it needs to, you know, it needs to involve a number of people. I think that's perfect for EMC, because I think that's what EMC does. I mean, at the end of the day, the EMC was established by multiple organizations, bringing people in from several places. So, you know, I feel like, you know, it's a perfect thing for that group to do. It's just we need to define, you know, what we're putting together and what we, you know, what the end product needs to look like. So that's what I'm thinking. I think we need this roadmap or this pathway or whatever, however we want to frame it. Because simply continuing to talk about harmonization, I don't think talking about it's getting it done. I think things are happening, and Adrian's already pointed that out. I think things are happening. I think as we move forward with new methods and revising methods, I think we're more mindful of how we're doing these things. However, there is a lot of things in the history that haven't been touched, and no, we're not gonna go back and we're not gonna touch every old method and make it new or bring it forward or whatever, because it doesn't make sense. Not all of them are relevant, but we need to understand what is relevant and what's most useful, and how we can try to bring those together. That's just my thoughts on it.
This is Zoe. I think that that's an excellent way to put it. I think that the industry has changed. You know, it's not a lot of immature startup labs anymore. So the industry has changed. The infrastructure in the US has changed. I always say I'm a taxpayer first. So what do I want as a taxpayer? Well, I want to live in a safe place. I want these measurements to be done efficiently. I want lots of measurements to be done. So this is a way to move forward with, I think, all of the involved parties supporting what we're talking about. So I think that's an excellent idea.
Thanks, though. I appreciate those comments. Feel free, anybody, to chime in with some other thoughts. You know, I just feel like we're to a place now where we need to define this and define what success looks like, because, you know, again, we're all mindful of it, but until we have an actual formal effort I just don't think we're not gonna be able to measure our success for that to give us the confidence that we're moving in the right direction. Right now, we can't measure what we're doing. We know that things are happening, but there's no milestones, if you will, that lets us know that, hey, we've gotten from point A to point B. Now we got to get to point C. You know, and the shortest distance between two lines is a straight. 2 points is a straight line, but holy cow, sometimes that straight line takes you over a mountain and through a river. And so I kind of feel like that's where we're at, but we've still got to draw those lines.
Judy, it feels to me like I think we all have a sense of what, these little bits and pieces of what this end, the end game looks like for us. We want it to look like this, and we want to be able to have, be able to take these kinds of approaches and whatnot. It's really almost it's almost visionary. I think we need to try to define what is that end, what does that, that end game look like for us. And then, you're talking about milestones along the way, and then back into, where are we now? Well, in order to get there, we've got to be able to get some agreement on, what are acceptable modifications, or we have to get on, how would we like to see quality control, dealt with, things like that. And maybe the EMC is a good place to kick that over, is define that, what's that vision look like for us. So we know what we have to begin with the end in mind, and it's maybe the end that EMC can help us define and get down on, get actually something written down. And then there, then it's all planning from there. Then that plan starts to come together.
I agree.
I buy that with one caveat. I think we need to continue some of the activities that have been started, like going back over some of the prioritized methods to bring them more in line, so that we've got a short-term focus and a long-term focus. And maybe it's ACIL that takes the short-term focus, and we toss the other to EMC so they can get us a longer-term focus.
Well, I think, Jack, that actually that's probably a really good exercise, in the sense that, a lot of the things that we're looking to define about, what's that ideal, are going to be, readily revealed when we have to go back and look at, some of this older stuff we're looking at and go, ooh,
Yep.
we don't want to do that again. So
Yep.
there's value in seeing where we're at.
Let me,
You ready to switch topics?
well, yeah, let me change the subject for a minute. Some other potential things, I don't know if people feel are important, is that should the EMC, it's not more of a focus on EPA in this case, it would be more a focus on the Congress and the states to really push to have a total national environmental laboratory accreditation program for all environmental monitoring, not just for the drinking water program. Is that something that people feel they want the EMC to try to tackle?
David, you've been reading my mind, because that's what I was going to bring up. But before I say that, I think we've got to understand that when we say that we don't have a national accreditation program, in the strictest of technical sense, that's true. But when you have between 25 and 30 states, not even mentioning and several federal organizations using the TNI standard in one form or another, whether they're ABs or accredited or what have you, we're pretty much there. We're getting there. But I think you hit it on the head, in that what we've really got to do is we've got to get, again, into to regulators and into Congress and stuff to determine acceptability, because there are a lot more places where it can be used, but we've gone, I'm not going to say as far as we can, but now it's diminishing returns until we get something that says, hey, you've got to have some kind of accreditation, you have to have this, or something along those lines. I think this would be a fabulous thing for EMC to work on.
No, I mean, it's not an EPA issue. EPA doesn't have statutory authority to really be here, but I mean, it would be something that the Congress would have to legislate. And I mean, there's lots of issues associated with it. But is that something that the group feels EMC should be looking at and trying to do what it can?
So would a document suggesting, how to word this, harmonization of QC for all different types of methods that are basically the same method, would that help on a national? I mean, if everybody had the same QC criteria per method.
Are you talking about laboratory accreditation now, or going back to
Well,
harmonization?
it's actually both, because, you know, I mean, if you pull one method, it might have different QC criteria than another method, even though they're measuring the same thing.
Okay, I was thinking more in terms of on the harmonization, on the accreditation issue, is that Congress would require that all environmental monitoring be done by accredited laboratories or
Bingo.
regulatory monitoring, and that could even go further to say that the standards have to meet national, the accreditations have to meet some particular set of national standards or something like that. Not get into very, very close specifics, but
Again, it's how do you eat the elephant?
This is Kim. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I absolutely agree with you, David. This is something that we're long overdue for Clean Water Act. I mean, for legislation on that as far as laboratory accreditation. We've had for years for drinking water labs, and we all know that the wastewater goes into the river, and then later on somebody downstream drinks it, and we're not monitoring it as far as accredited laboratories. And I know here in Oregon we've tried to push it with some of our legislature, and surprisingly, our Congress doesn't. Most of them have no idea that it's not required. They don't know, and so if they were to understand a little bit more that laboratories aren't required to go through accreditation, they don't have to do PTs, they don't have to do SOPs. I mean, they technically don't. You're not accredited. You can do it in your back of your truck. And so if it's not monitored closely by the DEQ, and that's been a bone of contention here, especially because there's only a couple of us labs that are accredited for wastewater. And then we have all these other labs that are undercutting our prices and getting most of the work. And that's frustrating because you can't stand that's not legally defensible data, and that's frustrating.
So yes, David, I think that should be an issue, and it should be addressed more towards Congress. And I don't think it's just well, it's going to be up to EMC how they decide to do it, but I don't think it's just a paper. I think, again, there needs to be a plan that says, here's how we're going to attack this so that, you know, there's some outcome. I mean, this is another one where we've talked about for years and years. One line, you know, in an appropriation bill could handle that. But it's a matter of getting it there and getting people to want to be able to do that in Congress and stuff. And that takes certain expertise that I know outside of my bailiwick.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to how do you do these things. All I'm just saying is getting you folks to talk, to think through possible things that you might want to attack by this organization.
Well, this is one of the things that I feel like, and yes, Jack, you're right. This has been talked about for quite some time, but this is one of the things that I feel like nobody has ever really owned the idea of doing this. And when I say that, I'm talking about from the standpoint of who pursues it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Mike Oscar, who is our current GRC person, and I know most everybody on here knows him. He is probably the best pulse that we have for what goes on up on Capitol Hill. And you're right, David, this is a congressional type decision. It's a congressional movement for any of this to happen. And it's like anybody that I've ever talked to that's ever lobbied for any particular cause or for any for in any particular time frame is it's all about timing. And so for
Yes.
this, I kind of feel like, we would need to lean on, we would need to do some, like what you just said, put down the purpose behind it, what we're trying to do, put a game plan together, but we would need to have somebody like EMC own that with, jointly with like ACIL, GRC, to have that GRC expertise. Because ideally, you want somebody who's dialed in on Capitol Hill and how things work in order to work through these types of things. So I 100% agree on the effort. I think that we've got to get it down on paper of what it looks like. What's the goal and what does it look like and how do we get there and who do we involve?
And the EMC would be a better organization to try to do that than ACIL, because not only does it have the commercial laboratories, you have the state laboratories, which have a closer link to Congress and the state legislatures. So you've got more clout, I'll put it that way. If you can get everybody on board, all the EMC people on board, organizations, I should say, then your chances of success are much better than if you just get the ACIL community on board.
And maybe part of that is ACIL, making the services of Mike Oscar available with to help with this process. Or but I think it's 100% right. They need to drive the plan because they're a more global organization. I mean, and Congress is going to listen to them more, and it gives us and whoever is doing the pushing on this more clout, if you will, because they have more access to more senators, more congressmen, more voters to be able to influence.
Okay. Since it's almost 1 o'clock, let me just throw out one other thing for people to comment on, and that is we focus in this industry tremendously on the analysis, what goes on in the lab, but we don't focus enough. But the greatest source of error is on sampling. And is that something that we need to change, and the EMC might be able to change that, to push for better standards on sampling? Or, okay, I guess that's not an issue that people feel strongly
I don't
about.
think it's better standards, David. I think it's the adoption of existing standards. Okay. Part of the biggest problem with the sampling not being adopted, or TNI's sampling not being adopted, is there's no requirement for it. So we're back to some sort of an accreditation, some sort of a requirement that someone have some sort of accreditation that has to be followed. So it's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that we have gotten this far as an industry without having that as a requirement, either, Office of Water, Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, to really dial that in and make there a more enforceable set of standards for the collection of samples feeding into those programs.
Yeah,
Well,
Adrian can correct me if I'm wrong, but the only program I know that's really focused on sampling is the air program, especially the source emissions, because sampling there is so physically difficult to do, as well as scientifically difficult to do.
That's about right. I mean, Clean Water Act certainly has, like a section in the method about sampling and a few guidances out there for specific analyses. But, I wouldn't say we have a comprehensive sampling regulations or guidances.
All right. Judy, should we, and Brad, want to switch to our second topic of the meeting?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think we've got a good plan around two subjects, that are of great interest and have been kind of on the radar for a long period of time. I think the plan is that we've now got to bring we've got to bring an actual pathway to these things and get it down and actually make it an effort instead of just something that we've all worked on and we all want to see happen. I think if we formalize it, I think we'll see better traction on it. And just to kind of pull it all together, I mean, when we talk about the harmonization effort and a potential roadmap, to success for that actually kind of encompasses a lot of the other topics, or many of the other topics that are on the agenda. I mean, so when we talk about monitoring methodology for PFAS, when we talk about state methods and methodology and technology, all of that kind of gets encompassed into that harmonization effort in one way, shape, or form. So that effort alone will pull in a lot of different interests. And then when you combine that with the national accreditation push, from the standpoint of requirement, then that further pulls it all together. But they're two separate things because it's two different groups of people that have to make it happen. So anyway, with that being said, yeah, I think we've sufficiently covered the topics that we had on the first part of the agenda.
The second, I mean, ACIL, while its members are laboratories, we had the organization has a lot of associate members from the industries that support us, and ACIL would like to be valuable to those members. We really ACIL appreciates their contribution and would like to be more valuable. And the topic that we want to consider now, the next topic, is how ACIL may better assist its associate members in being helpful in reaching their audiences and so on. And David Kennedy from Phenomenex has agreed to chair this session. So I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks, David. Thank you, everyone who is participating today. I don't know what I was thinking when David asked me to lead this, but in weakness and respect to our long friendship, I agreed. So this will be kind of an exploration exercise that we don't have a specific agenda here other than to try to get input from the membership, both labs and associate members, the vendors, and try to address this question of how we might be able to increase the value of vendors. Let me kind of start by telling you why I'm interested in this subject. Well, first of all, I'm a vendor, but I've been an ACIL member for, gosh, I can't remember, either going back to 1987 or 1988. I mean, that's a long time in the last century or so. Started out by being in the laboratory community, being involved in being a laboratory member, and then that switched over in 1997 to being on the other side of the cash register and being in the vendor community, and that's where I am today. But I have that appreciation of the organization and its value, and I can see both sides of that value equation to the laboratories, but also to the vendors. So being a believer that we're bringing value, our purpose is to bring value to the memberships, and we need to explore ways to do that, we decided to focus on the vendor side of that equation. Not that that's the only issue, but it's probably not been addressed as strongly maybe as some other issues that affect the laboratories. So as you know, there are two main member categories, regular members or laboratories, and associate members, vendors. And I think it's important to recognize going in, particularly if you're in the vendor community, that ACIL, in ACIL laboratories essentially own the organization. And I'll put that own in quotation marks. From the standpoint that the organization was formed and is chartered to represent the laboratory membership. Now, vendors are full participants in this exercise, But I kind of always look this more as family members, or our value, our reason for belonging to ACIL is it's a part of our ecosystem as vendors that our membership in ACIL are our customers. And so we have this opportunity to participate in this venture with the laboratories, our customers, for the greater good of all. And so out of that, we get value through this association. And I think the primary value, just on the theoretical side, is being an associate member of ACIL as a vendor allows us to partner with our customers, which is always a good thing, whether it takes place through the association or in other ways on the outside. To be a part of your supporting your customer and their venture. I think all legitimate vendors see that as one of their primary objectives in business. So if that's the value in theory, the real question here that we'd like to address in looking at the vendor participation is, in theory, it's valuable, but in practice, how is that implemented? And are we doing all that we can reasonably to make this valuable for vendors, since we're participating in this venture? So there's already things that we're doing. I mean, it's not that there is no participation. I mean, just throw out as examples that we exhibit at meetings. That gives us this interaction with our customers. Another very important area, vendors get to serve on committees. And those of us, I think many of those here on the call are active participants, and we can make our contribution to the association, but also receive the value of having those associations. There's a quarterly newsletter, there's other kinds of things that are already out there. But this is all well and good, but the question today is, could this be improved? Could we create more value for vendors? And in the process, perhaps attract more vendor membership. So the question today, how can we enhance that interaction to provide more value to vendors? I want to say that it's not an open-ended question, because there's got to be a balance on that in terms of providing value to vendors. We can't forget that the membership, the regular membership, the laboratories have a say in this. And if that were open-ended or unbounded influence by vendors, there's got to be a balance in here. So we're looking for these reasonable ways to keep the organization balanced between the interests of the laboratory members and the vendors. So some ideas that have already been thrown out there that may have been talked about before: the idea of ACIL hosting vendor webinars, maybe linking to vendor websites, other kinds of things. There's some ideas floating around, but the whole purpose today is not to sell anything or to say, here's a proposition. It's really to get the input from the membership, both vendors and labs. So I'm going to now open that up, and I'm going to first ask if there are any members out there that have an issue that they want to get out on the table, they feel very passionate about, or am I going to have to pull it out of you people to get some participation here? So the choice is yours. First of all, let me ask, does anybody have something that they would want to lead off with that they see is particularly important in this question? And I'll follow my rule. I've been taught to, after you ask a question, to wait 6 full seconds before you try to jump in there again. So clock's running. Anybody got any suggestions they'd like to make to open this up?
David, this is Brad Meadows. I'm curious, you're with Phenomenex. To what degree, or do you have a feel for how many customers have found their way to you through the ACIL?
That's interesting, Brad. I don't have statistics on that, but it's always been a belief of mine from being an ACIL member for a long time that based upon the Woody Allen rule, which is 80% of life is just showing up on time, by that participation and exposure and involvement, that those people who are members and many laboratories know are already customers, you can't help but enhance that perception in a customer's mind that, oh, know that person, know that company, they're active in ACIL. It's a way of acquiring some mind share at the very least. On the other side of the coin, if you don't show up and your competitor is there and they're participating and making contribution, it kind of makes an unspoken statement about how do you, view your involved in the laboratory community. Now, that's for those members that are members of ACIL. For people who aren't, I mean, I don't know how much that would impress their thinking. We do try to identify ourselves with ACIL whenever we have a chance, but I'm kind of assuming as basic fundamental truth that by being an active vendor member in ACIL, besides paying your dues, being involved, has a positive influence on the business that if you weren't doing it would be negative. I could not put a dollar value on that, and it's almost impossible to quantify, but it's kind of a article of faith, I guess I would say. But let's let anybody else here that is who's else? I'm looking on the scoreboard here in the vendor category. William Lips, I'm going to ask you if you have anything to say regarding Brad's question. You usually have an opinion, as I've come to learn.
I have an opinion, really? Wow. So Brad's question, well, okay, first, for me, my agenda for ACIL is going to differ extensively or tremendously from my immediate manager who's VP of sales and marketing, right? So
right.
My goals for ACIL aren't necessarily driven by did we sell something. Of course, as a company that's out to sell something, that's not my goal and how I justify the membership fee that we pay for ACIL. So eventually he's going to be wondering, did we sell something? So that, would answer Brad's question. Now, back to Dave's comment, we never know, right? I mean, you never know when you're doing marketing where that sale came from. I mean, never is a wrong word, but it's virtually never a direct path. And so really it's just the exposure, you see Phonomics, Dave helped you out on this and those kind of things. And eventually you open up there's no catalogs anymore, but eventually you open up the Phonomics catalog and you buy something because you're familiar with the word Phonomics. I mean, that's really how marketing works, but it's really, really, really hard to explain this to somebody who only looks at the short-term sales, so, and that's my immediate boss, right? So, I think we're pretty well convinced this time around that it's a different manager. This time around that, ACIL is important for other things beyond simply getting a sale, but we still need to justify the time and effort and whatever. So if somebody was to buy something, I'd be done. No, just kidding. That was your turn, Zoe.
You want me to take a turn? I think the opportunity is also there to better understand the market, to be up to date on what the current issues are and to be able to respond to them better. When I was with PerkinElmer, I always felt that I was a voice for the customer in whatever PerkinElmer did. So, I agree with you completely. It's very hard to measure that impact. It's hard to know what the actual sales that are due to any particular thing in marketing are. I mean, I joke about that all the time that you can't tell what the difference is, because if you ask, it will all come down to the salesperson said that their personal selling skills are what made that sale happen.
Yeah, you never get the credit, you always get the blame in marketing. So that's a factor. I seem to hear both of you saying that that you're seeing this kind of inherent value of being, I don't know if the term player is right, but you're in marketing, you're participating, you need to participate in the industry or to gain knowledge, to gain understanding, to understand what customers are thinking about. And right now you recognize that access or value that ACIL offers from a professional standpoint to understand the market, understand the customer, and not so much in a sales focus. I don't know if I summarized that adequately. It was probably too long-winded to be an effective slogan. But access seems to be, or participation in the industry, ACIL offers a venue to do that. And really, my hearing you say that's more professional than sales.
I think you hit a lot of it right on the nose. My position is a little bit different, having like David been in a lot of the very areas. What I think would benefit the vendors, maybe even as much as the laboratories, would be to help the vendors better understand where the vision is going. What I mean by that is, uh, in 10 years, what do the vendors have to have in place, and what are they looking for, and what are our customers looking for from the vendor, so that we can anticipate it. It kind of goes the other way also. I mean, vendors have a lot of information on what's the latest and greatest out there, where's some of the research going, those types of things. But I think that dialogue, I think, is incredibly important to helping, me figure out where I want my company to go and how I can better support not only ACIL members, but all of the different types of laboratories we deal with. Now, I'm selling a product, but it's more the service than the product. So it's a little bit different than the others, but it's still a relationship sell. And I think that's how I would say we could develop further the relationship between the vendors and the members. Is, where are we going to be in 10 years? I mean, 20 years ago, everybody was talking about we are never going to get away from paper. It's always going to be paper, remember?
Yep.
Now we're finally getting to the point where it's a hell of a lot more electronic. Having some of those things available from a visionary standpoint, I think would help both parties move in the directions of success. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, it does. Just kind of asking you to clarify that. Right now, for example, yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, and I'm very interested in this, and I think a lot of the other vendors are at some level. So right now, for example, through the Government Affairs Committee and the things that we hear, and from like the ESS section meetings we attend, we do pick up things, and it's not totally by osmosis. I mean, that's a topic now and then. You seem to be suggesting, could we find a forum or maybe create a forum to allow that to be more direct, or that might be more of a subject of interest that focus on the 10-year horizon for both the vendors, but also for the laboratories. And it's kind of a two-way street. The vendors would kind of like to hear what the laboratories are seeing and where they're aiming their business toward, and the labs might be interested in hearing, hey, what are you guys cooking up in the R&D lab right now that we might be interested in, and interact more directly on that basis. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think you're getting there, and the idea of some sort of I would hope to be a reoccurring forum of getting, for want of a better word, some of the old dogs as well as some of the new dogs together and say, where do you see this place going in 10 years?
Yeah, I beg your
What do you
pardon.
see happening?
Yeah.
Types of things.
You think maybe
Um,
in like at the annual meeting or P2 or something type of
yeah, I know that I've worked on a couple of projects where, where they're building laboratories for government agencies or federal agencies, and one of the things that I tend to get brought in on is as the soothsayer. Where's the lab going to be in 20 years? Because it's going to take us a while to build this thing. So we don't want to build it to today's technology. We want to build it to where the technology is going to be in the future. And I think that's along the lines of where I'm thinking when I'm talking about vision.
Okay. Yeah, good thought. Any comments about that? We're going to ignore your old dog comment being one.
Well, that was only directed to me.
Oh, excuse me. I thought I was
Well,
being singled out. Anyway,
Dave,
so anybody else
Dave
want to
and
comment to that or offer another?
Dave and Jack, I mean, Jack, you just described basically why me personally, and Zoe did to an extent, is MNACIL, right? It's not selling, it's information and information sharing, and what does the future hold, and how can we make the future better, if you will.
Yes.
So
Yeah. And
I
I
just
think,
wanted to make that clear on my joke.
Yeah.
yeah, and more of a, actually, I mean, we get a lot of good information both ways that helps all of us, but maybe we need a focus of, let's look out 10 years or 15 years to when the cars are flying. What is the lab going to look like? Type of thing, or what is my assessor business going to look like?
Okay. Good. Any follow-up questions from anybody else? How about from the laboratory? You, Judy, Brad, others. Do you see value in this from the laboratory side? This kind of an idea of a more focused venue on the 10-year kind of a horizon where both vendors and laboratories would participate, share information.
Yeah, okay. So for me as a laboratory, I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. The biggest advantage to having ESS being, a group of both laboratories, suppliers, and then others, and that actually get to participate, is honestly it's the familiarity and having a go-to person. And I know this really isn't answering your direct question, David, but and I know you and Zoe and William and y'all have said you can't really measure the benefit so much, but from my perspective, for me, it makes it easier for me to trust a product from Phenomenex or from Shimadzu or from PerkinElmer or from our suppliers if I know a person that I can go to if I have an issue. And so it's the relationship, of having a known representative for that company that sits in a position that can actually help with something and answer a question or help out with a pathway if there's a problem or an identified issue.
Yeah, you were talking about the relationship there, not just with the company, but now a specific person known to you that's kind of proved their worth by participating. You've worked with them on a committee or whatever. That gives you confidence that if something does arrive, a problem, you've got his number or her number.
Yeah, I can actually give you a good for instance on that. Okay, so on the consumables task force for TNI, we've identified a number of different things, and we've had people, send in certificates of analysis, and Jack Farrell's been part of this because we've done assessment forums on this. And so what we've done is we've identified where there's been issues with certain products that we're all accustomed to using, but the actual issue is widespread enough that several laboratories and even accreditation agencies know about these problems. But where do you go with that? So for me, if it was a problem with a Phenomenex product, I would come to you and I would say, hey, Dave, we've got an issue with this column, and we're hearing from other laboratories that they're having the same issue, and we can't seem to get any traction on and get any help. You give me the right person. Well, if it comes from you and you contact that person within your organization, they're going to be more likely to listen to our problem and our issue than if I just call whoever. And I'm not saying the companies aren't responsive. I'm just saying that the pathway is probably shorter because of the relationships than it would be if you were just, customer supplier type relationship.
Yeah. Let me tell you a little secret that I think probably my colleagues on the vendor side would agree with. That's also very valuable for the very same reason to people like me. The last thing you want out there in the community is something happens, the product is received that doesn't work, customers unhappy, they're all pissed off about it, but it doesn't get to the point where a resolution is made and or it takes a long time. So I honestly like getting these calls from people that said, hey, you people are messing me up. I need help. Got to fix this. That's a really great opportunity if you have a problem, and problems will arise. Get right to the heart of it at the level where you can be effective. And I do this often enough that people know within my organization, if I give them a call that say, hey, I just got a call from so and so, I'm going to get immediate attention, and that situation is going to get addressed quickly. It's not that you don't have good systems for people calling in, but working your way through the system, or it's nice if you can just call somebody and say, okay, here's a problem, and now you know you're going to get a solution. So that's valuable to us as well, Judy. And I know I'm on a lot of people's call list for that very purpose. And
Can I, this is Dave Friedman. Listening to this discussion, I was wondering, would there be value to the vendor community and to the laboratory community if ACIL was to host forums with a representative, let's say on a particular technology, I'll throw ICP-MS for want of a better term, technology, out on the table and say, okay, each vendor of that type of technology, each member vendor would identify who in their company would be a really good technical person and a communication person to talk. And a forum was put together for our member laboratories to talk to those people about problems that they have, not with a particular vendor's equipment, but with the technology, issues with that technology. That would give the company's feedback, the vendor's feedback on issues that need to be addressed, and also would allow our laboratories to then know if you're having a problem with a particular vendor equipment in that technology, who the right person to go right to them might be. Would something like that be useful to everybody?
so you're talking, Dave, if I could paraphrase, this is kind of a troubleshooting forum related to specific areas of technology that
Each quarter, maybe pick one technology, one type of technology. It could be a sampling technology, it could be whatever, analytical technology and so on. And the vendors that are involved in that would just have one of the right technical person who's in charge of that, who's really knowledgeable of that, participate in, let's say, a 1-hour forum just for the laboratories to get an opportunity to talk about any problems that they have or any issues that they have in implementing that particular type of technology. Not a particular problem with a particular instrument, but really more general kind of problems.
But I'll before we open that up, I'd like to hear some comments from others. I'll just say that from the vendor community, at least from where I stand, and I think others would be interested in doing that. I think the real question is, would the laboratories see value in that? I mean, we've got experts in various areas we would that serve that purpose, I think, could participate. But if the laboratory were to say, well, we've already pretty well got that area covered, that might not be the area we want to focus on. So, Judy, Brad, any other laboratory participants here? What do you think of David's thought, or can you add more to that, or give some color?
Okay, so I can see the value to it, and it kind of speaks to what a little bit of what I was trying to address, just from the standpoint of, and back to my original example of talking about a column and having issues. Is the column the problem, or is the use of the column the problem? And has somebody already learned something at Phenomenex dealing with this with somebody else that they could share with the rest of us, so that those who haven't come forward yet, as they're still trying to troubleshoot something, that, you know, the subject matter alone may solve the question at hand. So that's kind of that. I do see the value to that, because many times, you know, people will continue, and I say this because I've watched it happen, to languish with a piece of equipment, whether it be a consumable or whatever it is, and they just keep calibrating and calibrating and calibrating until they exhaust whatever, you know, troubleshooting they can do, and only to find out that, I don't know, that some little funky something that that you found out about it needs to be told to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Brad, do you have anything to add on that topic? Okay, so 5, 6. Okay, interesting suggestion, David. I know we've done seminars before, back pre-COVID, when you could actually travel, where you would go to a vendor site and you would give, you know, seminars like that. And I mean, and we get a lot of good questions from people, practical and very valuable. It actually would be more efficient, I think, to be able to do that on a online forum, now that we're more comfortable with this kind of a format. So sounds like an interesting idea. Let's hear one of the other vendors weigh in. Anybody we haven't heard from that have an opinion on that, the value of that?
This
Well,
is Jennifer from Waters. I
Mhm.
mean, it sounds like we're talking about, you know, in my mind, something that's like a tips and tricks, maybe, sort of forum. And I mean, I think there would be value. We'd have to maybe take a look at how it's structured. You know, maybe it's a good way to push some information out about a technology, and then take questions from the users group that would have interest in that. I mean, so I think you could see value, you know, going both ways. It'd be a good way for the vendors to hear, you know, what are some of the challenges that the laboratories might be facing with certain technologies.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
so William, we could do that obviously as well, but to Judy's point, I prefer that for our company anyway, that if there's a problem with an ACIL laboratory having a problem with our instrument, that I would get the email saying we're having a problem with this, so that I could direct where it goes, because if they get it from me, you're going to get a response faster than if you give it straight to them.
Right. So this is really addressing the same issue, one in a very direct, intimate way of, hey, I've got this problem, I need help. William, save me. To more of a general, you know, here are the more common things that you might experience in trying to do this method or employ this technology, and have a more broad discussion, as opposed to, so both, sounds like both things, you know, might be of interest. Is there right now, Judy, there's nothing to stop you, obviously, from calling me or William or anybody else that you have a relationship, but is there something that you can see that might make this more generally available to the membership? Is there something, I don't know, I don't want to be answering questions, but think of anything that might enhance that ability to call somebody up and get their attention that we might do? Or is it just sufficient to know that I'm on your Rolodex?
David again, I was visioning something that's slightly different than just solving problems, but as a way of the technology innovation community, vendor community, getting a understanding of maybe problems that the laboratory people have that is not that they could then understand better what changes they might have their researchers figure out how to address. Not exactly, it's just like when I was in product development, the hardest point is knowing what the clients really need or really want. And I was thinking of as a way of getting the people in the laboratory that are using these technologies on a daily basis, interacting with researchers or product experts in the vendor community to basically sharing thoughts, ideas, and better understanding of the needs at the laboratory level.
Right. So more of a direct interaction, a broader interaction, sounds like. Okay.
If I might suggest, I mean, I think it's really important to have that name or that go-to person, as Judy would say, to be able to go to and say, hey, you know, I need to talk to somebody about. But one of the other ways we might want to think about, and it's using technology, maybe it's old technology, um, but two things. One is the old billboard approach, or bulletin board approach, where, you know, as issues come up, hey, this has been an issue with a column, you should know about it, or with a product that you should know about it. The other one is, I guess I would call them kind of focus groups, and we've used this in a number of organizations. The one that comes to mind right now is with small laboratories, where there's an organization, there's a small lab, we call it a small lab advocate group in TNI, where they meet monthly, every 2 months, or whatever, and it's just a whole bunch load of people that bring issues to the table. It might be on a method, it might be on you know, how do I meet this calibration? It might be, you know, what do I do about this? But it's you know, a two-way street with a moderator that kind of, you know, gets to a whole lot of issues and gets to you know, developing a relationship there to talk about whether it's some tips or some issues that a lab may be having that either another lab or a vendor or somebody can help with, type of thing. So, you know, that might be an approach to how to do this.
That kind of sounds like it's in the same general ballpark of what David was talking about, but it's kind of a more specific type of example. How would you implement that? It's
Yeah,
kind of an online focus group kind of thing. It's like you can kind of envision that moderated, curated, kind of a thing, special topic, specific people, as opposed to maybe a broader subject where you might do a open seminar and hope to draw questions. So it sounds like it's a much, well, focus group means, yeah, it's focused. So, but dealing with
and it's a
certain
come and
issues.
go as you want,
Mhm.
but it's a repetitive forum of some kind
Okay.
that, you know, people that have a similarity, a small lab, or maybe it's a microbiology lab, or something like that, can get together with themselves and vendors
Mhm.
and work out issues and you know, those types of things.
So kind of like a vendor user forum,
Yeah,
ongoing, and people I assume would get to suggest topics. Hey, I really want to hear about X, Y, or Z. That's important
yeah,
to us.
Yeah,
So
like I
members
yeah.
would,
It could
it's
be that too, not focusing as on as much on selling, but yes, getting feedback to vendors and also to, you know, to laboratories, but also some of those tricks and trades that you talked about, but also, hey, you know, I've been trying to, you know, implement this method for so long, and here's a problem I'm having. Has anybody had any experience?
Mhm.
And, you know, have that discussion or make those contacts.
That's interesting because I think it's a two-way street. There's some
Yep.
laboratories out there that know an awful lot about a certain application that we seek out as vendors to say, hey,
Yep.
what have you guys figured out? So I mean, it's not all vendors lecturing from on high. I mean, it really is a two-way street where information can be shared. If I'm following your
Exactly.
concept.
Yeah. Let me give an example of what I was talking about, and that was like going back when Purge and Trap first came about. You had foaming problems. It was not that any particular vendor's unit was bad or problem, but there was a general problem in dealing with certain types of samples. And we're going to find the same thing, I'll bet, when we start looking at COVID-19 and wastewater type, COVID and wastewater type testing. I'll bet you there's going to be a lot of problems that are going to start popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And having people who are dealing with those samples on a daily basis have a forum periodically to talk to people who are experts in the vendor community about that. And I think it would be useful both from the laboratory standpoint, because there may be things that they're not aware of that have already been addressed, and from the vendor community that maybe says, oh, okay, there's no solution to that right now, but I think I have some ideas how I can do it and come up with a new product to solve that particular problem. And that's what I envisioned.
Mm-hmm. You kind of added the emphasis on, you mentioned back in the day, Purge and Trap, when that was new, and people trying to figure out how that could be work efficiently. Where now we have something else coming down the pipe where you can envision easily in the COVID test, like, hey, sounds easy. Go get a sample, put some stuff in the tube, measure the DNA, but we know from experience that there's going to be a lot of really nitty gritty issues there that people are all going to be struggling with, and can we cut through that through a forum to share information, to solve problems both on the application side and also on the what the vendors maybe develop. So yeah, I think that's a interesting concept. I should, David, we didn't agree ahead of time on how we wanted to handle the output here, but what I'm going to suggest is that take a few minutes at the end of the hour. I think we got about 15 minutes just to summarize. Here are the 3 or 4 things that came up. But then, the cake's not baked at that point. I think we need to take, and you and I can work on this to try to refine this a bit and then get this out to the broader section of the membership, maybe at the section meeting, because we've got some good ideas here, but I'd like to open this up maybe as we can kind of boil it down to something more concrete and say this came out of this discussion session at P2, and we'd like to further develop these ideas. I don't want to get a bunch of ideas and then they go off in the corner and die somewhere. I think we have something that really sounds worthwhile that we want to refine this and carry it forward. So that'd be my suggestion. So on that topic, or any other topic, is somebody we haven't heard from? Anybody have a thought they'd like to add? Let me just ask is Adrian still with us? Yeah, there he is. Adrian, if we were to come up with some kind of a forum of that sort, would that be something you'd be interested in sitting in on? Hear that dialogue?
So you're really thinking about the forum mainly for what, harmonization, or just the forum in general that you're talking about, what people want, need, etc.
This would be a forum. I think it kind of came out of some things that Jack and Judy have said, that particularly when a new method is put out in the field, and David used the example of this COVID coming out, and people are struggling with implementation and issues come up that people are doing, having some sort of a standing forum. I think this was Jack's idea, where vendors and laboratories get together and address certain issues and maybe it would be, the COVID-19 test procedure would be the topic of this month's forum. And people come with questions and there's an exchange back and forth. And out of that may come solutions that one laboratory said, hey, we tried this and this worked. Another output might be that a vendor would say, well, we've had good experience with trying this. In other words, it's kind of a combination of problem solving, technology sharing, getting that kind of information out more quickly. But it's basically a discussion between users and vendors, and trying to optimize things.
Well, I mean, definitely, I'd take it a step further though, and I'd be more targeted at EPA about the topic of that forum.
Mhm.
Like there are some forums where I'd probably be very helpful to be present. There are other
Yeah.
forum topics where I'd be pretty useless.
Mhm.
And then the same goes for the other EPA offices. I mean, I think if you have a forum topic, and I'm happy to help you guys talk to the right person, but depending on the topic, you should have the right EPA person there.
Right. So the idea, if we did this, to certainly let you and other branches know that this is a topic coming up. You're welcome to participate either as a listener or if you have anything to bring to the table. But be a participant in that sharing. It's your choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to attend. I mean, I like ACL. I'm glad that and EMC. I'm glad they exist. They're very helpful for me to do my job. I'm just saying that I think you want to target the topic of the forum with the EPA people you want there. But I'm happy to attend.
Okay. All right. Good. That's excellent
Yeah, in
suggestion.
some cases, I mean, it would be an EPA researcher, if the ORD, that might be the appropriate people to have there.
Mhm.
Person
True.
to have. I mean, if it's a technology that's being worked on in laboratories right now, in EPA's laboratories.
Yeah, so let me add something real quick to that. So just kind of piggybacking off of what Adrian was just saying, one of the things I can see here is, and I can appreciate what he's saying about appropriate, who appropriate representation would be. But with our current contacts with the Office of Water and with drinking water folks and ORCR, I could see where if Dave Kennedy and his team, or William Lips and his team, or any of our other suppliers on the phone, we're going to put on one of these forums because of a product issue or just new technology or whatever. I could see them notifying Adrian, Lim, Troy, whoever's appropriate, and saying this is what we're getting ready to do, and if you want to participate, that's great. If you don't want to participate, you're welcome to attend and and chime in and give opinions. But I could see where Adrian could say, yeah, that's not my thing, but contact so and so because he or she may want to participate. So I could see some real value to this if if we can get it coordinated and get some things put together.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just as to be completely selfish, if it's something that's specific to another methods program, it's really not my place to provide comment.
Mhm.
And I know other people at the other offices would feel the same way, given the circumstance.
Right. Yeah, we need to be careful of the procedures there. Judy or David, if we were to go in this direction, again, how would this be hosted? Would this be a section kind of a function, or an ILI, kind of a undertaking? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it should be well, a lot of this technology covers more than just environmental testing.
Mhm.
So I would think ACIL might want to do this as an organization, so combined with FSS and even with for example, cannabis labs might have use in some cases. That's my 2 cents. Whether it's ILI or ACI, how ACIL does it, that's another issue that I believe we can address. Judy, Brad, what are your thoughts?
Okay, real quick for me, I think Brad had to leave. I know he had something he had to go do. Real quick for me on this one, I kind of feel like it, depending on what the product is, I mean, we could set it up in a number of different ways. The only thing that I would caution is that even if it does cover multiple sections or multiple things, I would have to say that depending on what it is, we might choose to do something more specific to a particular section, depending on depending on the product. But I think there's a decision tree, if you will, that you would want to kind of go through to make sure that you don't over dilute your audience to the point that they're not going to be able to engage and get the value out of it. That would be my only thing on that. But I see the value all the way around. I mean, I could see a lot of good reason to do this, but I do think it would have to be a very thoughtful approach. But I do love it.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is an interesting concept, but the devil's in the details, and I think more would need to be done on this. Well, let me just throw this out. So if you want to develop this idea, or anyone that comes out of this forum more carefully, I guess my default position would be to pull in a couple of people from this group that are discussing this. And I mean, I know we can circulate this to a broader membership, and I don't want to exclude people, but I would think to develop something like this further, a small group, 4 or 5 people that have an interest in this to take this to the next step would be the way I would go, as opposed to throwing some. I've not had really good luck of throwing out a developing topic that's this visionary, I guess, to a broad group and expect to get useful input or get a resolution. You usually need to get something more specific. So David, that would be my thought, that we might digest this and then do some, just let people know what's going on, but we would want to get a more complete idea in place before we put it forward.
Okay, David, to get back to what you had said about 10 minutes ago, before the notes that I had put together during this discussion, let me run through them and see if everybody agrees I captured it right, and before we're finished here. And one is and I'm sorry if there's train of consciousness kind of things, how to better understand the vision of the industry. What does the industry need from the vendor community? Help the vendors better understand how vendor community can better support the industry, especially looking at 10 to 20-year horizon. How can we make the future better? What is a future laboratory going to look like? Put together possible forums at annual meetings to look ahead. Maybe quarterly focus groups with vendor and laboratory experts to discuss issues with a particular technology or with an analytical problem. That would bring together experts from the laboratories and experts from the vendors. Bulletin board possible for laboratories to pose problems. We would invite EPA folks to participate in such sessions. Determine how ACAL could or should implement such a program, and put together a small working group to draft a plan of action to address how laboratories and vendors can work together to help each other. That's the notes I have. Anything else I should add, David?
Those are, I was just glancing at my notes as well. I'll say, why don't, my suggestion is that you put these together on paper as the notes. I've got some notes. Let's you and I combine those, If anybody else has any thoughts here, let's incorporate that. But then let's maybe clean up the language and then circulate it to this this group that's on the line now and say, okay, this is what the two Davids heard, and your comments. Did we miss something? Anything you'd like to amplify? And then, that becomes the output of the discussion. I would like to get the full group to look at the our two note keeping exercises to make sure that we haven't missed something. Any other thoughts on that?
Hi, David. This is Lem. If Jack is on the line, Jack, could you still confirm that the State Assessors Forum is still active, and is that still going? I know you used to be an invited guest on that forum that used to be held once a month.
The small lab group.
State Assessors Forum.
Oh, the State Assessors Forum. I haven't been on there for a while. I get an email now and then. I have a feeling they switched to social media, but I think they're still there. And I actually just got something from someone from APA. It was APHA along those lines. So I think it's still there, but I don't know how active it is.
When we publish the 600 series, I was going to have people scheduled to actually give presentations there. I know Judy was actually one person that was going to give an introduction to 624.1, and so that's one venue that I know it's always open and very active. It's all 50 states, so it's a perfect opportunity to kind of get the message out.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to go back to APHA on that, because I think they would be the ones that'd be managing it.
Okay.
Lem, you might want to also at the next EMC meeting, we can if you want to make some kind of announcement, or just send me something and I can just make everybody aware of it.
Okay, sure.
Be glad to.
Sure, absolutely. I'll get the information. I haven't seen a meeting invite in a while. I remember Jack being on the mailer,
Yeah.
but I've not seen it in a while.
Me neither.
So, okay.
Maybe because I talk too much.
No, well, that must mean both of us, because we're both disinvited. So I'll find out.
Excuse me, gentlemen, this is Bob. Should I have both of you on the invitation list for EMC? Jack?
I would love to be on the invitation list.
All right. I think we've already sent out the notification for the next meeting, which will be on the 26th of this month at starting at 3 p.m. Eastern time. But I'll send a copy to you, Lem. Same with you?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
if they want to have me, I'll be happy.
Well, we don't want you too happy, Jack, but I'll be glad to. Thank you.
Well, nobody says I'm happy yet, so every little bit helps.
Okay, David, do we need to, I think that's a reasonable summary. We're going to write this up, circulate it, get.
Right, I'll write my
Summary
notes
discussion.
up and send them to you, David, and then you can polish them up and add your stuff to it. And once you're happy, we can make it available to a large group.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I would like to, I think some interesting, very interesting ideas came out of this, and I'd like to see us capture that and see if we can move something forward that would be useful to both labs and vendors, and also to the regulating community as well. We're all in this together, as they say. All right, thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Thank you for leading this second half of the discussion. I appreciate it. I think this has been very productive. I'm very pleased with the information that we've collected today, and I'll be excited to see the notes, that shows the summary of all of the things that we talked about and the details of the discussion. I want to thank everybody too for hanging out with us. for this time period this morning and this afternoon, and just let you know each how much I appreciate your participation and just being present for the meetings.
Good job, all.
Thank you.
Dave
Okay.
Friedman, you got anything?
Nope. Thank everybody. I appreciate everybody's participation.
Thanks, guys. Excellent meeting. Appreciate it very much. Y'all have a good rest of the week and a good weekend coming up.